Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I need to give Trump credit for something today. I need to give him credit for something. Now the funny part is the credit that I am going to give him comes to some degree at the expense of ridiculousness of the Washington Post. And I'm going to even say mainstream media in general. One of my big pet peeves that I think I've said before has to do with not giving the public necessary context. They can come to their own conclusion in regards to let the public come to a conclusion, but let that conclusion be based upon as much of the information that we have available to us as possible, not just narratives. There's a difference in those things. So this is the Washington Post. Trump ends covert CIA program to arm anti-Assad rebels in Syria. A move sought by Moscow. Because, of course, if Trump is going to try to do something like that, it has to be because of Putin. Putin had to have pushed him in to do it because Trump is just an agent of Putin, and everything that Trump does to some degree is related to Russia. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And this article, in and of itself, is horribly written. And this is Greg Jefe and Adam Intuis. You guys are crummy writers. You guys are crummy writers. A, you're not giving your audience context to understand what the fuck is actually going on. B, you're just spoon feeding them certain narratives. And C, in this article, they try to say Trump and Russia as often as they possibly can and as many clever combinations as they can come up with. That's this article. That's essentially what this article is. The main, or the most mind-blowing part of the article is completely unacknowledged. Many of these things are, I've always said, it's not necessarily just what they say, it's also the things that don't go, they don't say. What are they not telling us? What's not being espoused? What are the things they're emphasizing as opposed to the things that should be emphasized? Or at the very least should be acknowledged. That should be acknowledged. I'm going to read it and I'll come back to do it. President Trump has decided to end the CIA's covert program to arm and train moderate Syrian rebels battling the government of Bashar al-Assad, a move long sought by Russia, according to U.S. officials. The program was a central plank begun by the Obama administration in 2013 to put pressure on Assad to step aside. But even its backers have questioned its efficacy since Russia deployed forces in Syria 2 years later. Officials said phasing out the secret program reflects Trump's interest in finding ways to work with Russia, which saw the anti-Assad program as an assault on his interests. So they need to get across to you, hey, I think they've hit Russia, what, in 3 paragraphs? We've had 3 paragraphs, and in each paragraph, they've hit on this idea of he's doing this because of Russia. He's doing this because of Russia. He wants to work with Russia. This is something that Russia absolutely wanted. Donald Trump is working with Russia. The entire article is that way. The entire article is that way. Now, let's start in the beginning now. President Trump has decided to end the CIA's covert program to arm and train moderate rebels battling the government of Bashar al-Assad. The first point is, yes, that is the government of Bashar al-Assad, meaning he is the legal representative of Syria, of that particular government. So that's the first point. Moderate Syrian rebels. What does that mean? What is a moderate? What does it mean to be moderate? I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means. Moderate is a political term that's used in this particular case to make it as if there's a distinction between factions fighting Bashar al-Assad. These people are terrorists. These people are terrorists. Now, whether you want to use the term, I mean, because understand, ISIS is fighting Assad. You have elements of Al-Qaeda fighting Assad. You have all these different elements in the region fighting Assad. This idea that we found quote-unquote moderates, and we've been giving those moderates resources. They use the term moderate because saying the United States has been funding terrorists to undermine another government. Ugh, that feels wrong. That feels weird. That feels, people feel a particular way. But that is the actual truth. When Tulsi Gabbard and Dennis Kucinich went to Syria, they snuck off, went to Syria. She came back and she kind of made this point. They want us to stop arming terrorists. They want us to stop arming terrorists. We're essentially giving resources to terrorists to undermine a sovereign government. And look, the article itself, the government of Bashar al-Assad. Second paragraph. The program was a central plank of a policy begun by the Obama administration in 2013 to put pressure on Assad to step aside. Yes, this was a dumbass idea. What the Obama administration, and one more thing, it's not all that covert. It wasn't all that covert. And this is kind of leading into the second one too. Yes, it was a plank of the Obama administration, but there were reports coming out showing groups that were backed by the CIA fighting groups that were backed by the military. This is the weird and ridiculous buffoonishness to which we were engaged in regards to foreign policy. Now, don't misunderstand me. Hillary Clinton's plan was worse. Obama at least realized that he didn't necessarily want United States troops in the middle of a civil war. He would prefer to pay terrorists to do that job, to be our proxies. Hillary Clinton wanted to put a missile defense shield in Syria. Now, that missile defense shield, if that would have tackled a Syrian plane or Russian jet, this country will be in a nuclear war. Her initial response was a complete provocation. That was her response. That was her grand idea in regards to getting us embroiled into a conflict with Russia. Obama was a little bit more tepid on this front, but it was still a horrible idea that ended up to no avail. This second paragraph also explains why, which is mind-blowing, and they just don't give any, they don't espouse anything else beyond that. They just take it as assumed to be okay. To put pressure on Assad to step aside. What authority, legal, international, God-given, does an American president that's bound by the laws of this particular country have at trying to get anybody else in any other particular country to step aside? Where? Where does his authority lie to do that? It's not given him by law. I mean, after all, Congress haven't declared war on Syria. Congress, for the most part, if I remember correctly, have only declared war within regards to Iraq. All of these other countries that we've been bombing in and that we've been running military operations in, there's no authorization for that. They just did that. There's a difference in those things. Nobody gave approval. Nobody gave authorization. Ultimately, the president himself, acting as if he was a king, made the decision unilaterally on his own power. I'm going to get that guy out of office because I want geopolitical influence in that region of the world. I understand this what you want, dude. What power, what authority does the laws of this country give you to do that? And beyond what authority, should you be doing that? Should you? What is the practical implications, or what is the practical result of the policy that Obama had in Syria? You have a war that killed upwards of, 300,000 people. That war likely would have been over with by now if we weren't necessarily giving money and resources to terrorists. Or I should say giving resources, I don't want to say money, but giving resources to terrorists to undermine that government. When Obama wanted to keep the war going because he wanted Assad out, just like the article said. He wanted him to step down. But this idea of whether he stepped down or not, that's not for Obama to make that choice. And ultimately what it ended up doing was essentially giving people who were trying to topple that government resources, allowing that war to just continue on. Several thousands of those people, you might even say 10,000s or tens of thousands of those people may be alive today if that war had ended. If the United States hadn't taken upon itself to give resources to the people fighting the government itself. Again, first part of the article, the government of Bashar al-Assad, the legal government of that particular nation. Now, I don't care how you feel about Assad. I don't have any particular feelings about Assad in regards to him being a good guy. He's not. But that's kind of besides the point. There are plenty of people around this planet that are bad people, including some of the people that Obama has called friends, meaning Saudi Arabia. It's not for us to do this. And in prosecuting this and doing this thing that I'd argue is illegal, you essentially maintain a war, killing tens of thousands of more people than would have otherwise been killed had the United States minded its own business. That's the truth of the matter. Now, officials said phasing out the secret program reflects Trump's interest in finding ways to work with Russia. Trump came in office saying he was going to work with Russia. So this is not mind-blowing to me. The second part is, how long do you want to keep this war going? And at the point where the Russian government has gotten into the war, are you still going to try to topple the government of Bashar al-Assad? Russia has already said that Bashar al-Assad is essentially working in tandem. Well, they're working in tandem. They're allies at this point. If the United States is trying to topple the government of Bashar al-Assad, the United States, for the most part, is having a proxy war to some degree with Russia. Every person that we've armed in this conflict that's killed somebody from Russia or killed somebody from Syria was our fault. It was our resources that went into it. I'm making this point that if Trump is saying, look, I have no interest in keeping this war going, and I think ISIS is more important than tackling Bashar al-Assad, I think Trump is right. That seems perfectly sane to me. I'd argue that many people voted for Trump for that very particular reason in regards to this foreign policy of keep us out of it. Keep us out of it. Now, those people were massively, what's the word I want to use? They were somewhat naive. I mean, you are talking about a Republican, meaning just because he doesn't necessarily want to, just because he thinks ISIS is more important in this particular case, doesn't mean he wouldn't foment tensions with Iran or North Korea. So that's fair. But in this very specific case, he said from the beginning he wanted to be conciliatory with Russia. The Democrats used that narrative to swift boat him, essentially saying Trump and Russia, Trump and Russia, Trump and Putin. All of this had to do with Russia. Russia hacked us, and they did it in order to get Trump elected, and Trump had to know about it. This is the narrative that's been going on the entire time. Anything Trump wanted to do to be conciliatory with Russia at this point would run headlong into that particular narrative, meaning it constrains his actions. What he can do and what he can pull off is constrained by the narrative that they're hitting him with. Whether the narrative is true or not mattered less, since the newspaper, like Washington Post, jumped on that particular bandwagon and screamed it along with the Democratic Party. I don't care why Trump wanted to be conciliatory towards Russia. I don't care if it was a situation where he had some kind of business ties before he took office. And look, if he does have business ties now, they're looking into it now. They're looking into it now. So I'm just making this point. For whatever reason he wants to be conciliatory towards Russia, I would prefer not to have this country to be embroiled into a nuclear war with Russia. And I think between the two strategies, it is far more sane to say we have nothing to do with that. That's their civil war. That's their issue. We're keeping ourselves at home and we're going to deal with our own affairs. But that's not necessarily indicative of Trump being manipulated by Putin in order to do this. The point I'm making is by them continuously saying Russia, again, they're feeding into this particular narrative of sorts of, if Trump is doing anything conciliatory towards Russia, it's because Russia helped him win the election. That's the lens that all of this is put through. The paper doesn't have to say that overtly. The hacking story, the way the media has ran with this idea of Trump and hacking, even though the evidence was scant at best, right off the bat, that's the narrative. That's the thing that's running through people's heads when they read this. So they don't have to say Trump did this to help Russia. The innuendo is enough. Trump hacked us. Well, I would argue the FBI never looked at those files, but okay, that's what they believe. Based on Trump hacking us or Trump being hacked by Russia, people make the assumption that, well, Trump had to know about it. He had to know about it. They don't have to hit that narrative here. The narrative is just understood by the people who are following this particular meme or running between this line of logic, if that makes sense. Yeah, this is actually a good thing. They're writing this in a very particular way. But do you honestly believe that the United States really should have any say-so on whether or not which governments it wants to kick over? Like just willy-nilly, the president of the United States on a whim can make the determination of which governments he wants to destroy on a whim. And are we to believe that the Syrian government would have devolved into something, some kind of tulip in that particular region of the world? It's Syria. How about Yemen? How about Afghanistan? I mean, I'm making this point that all of these, how about Iraq? How about Iraq? In which point was our influence positive? That entire region of the world is set on fire. Many of those countries are dumpster fires. Completely. There's no reason to believe that Syria would have turned out to be any different than any of those other countries. That's the truth of the matter. Obama has a mightily short memory or a very big ego. Neither one of those things should be making choices in this particular way. Your ego has nothing to do with governance. You should have dealt with the affairs of this particular country, not necessarily trying to undermine somebody else's government. You failed in Libya massively. Apparently that he wanted to do the same thing here. And for that matter, so did Hillary Clinton. They wanted to do the same thing. So let's be honest. So you know how I feel about Trump. So yeah, you've seen my other videos in regards to my thoughts on Trump. In this particular case, this is a good thing. I don't give a shit about my dislike for Trump. Doesn't necessarily have to do with who he is. It has to do with what he does. There's a difference in those things. I'm not affiliated with any particular party or anybody in particular. What I care about is what he does. In this very specific case, he's stopping the CIA from assisting terrorists to undermine another government. That government being embroiled into a civil war that's killed upwards of 300,000 people. And the support of the United States in doing so, keeping that war going. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Russia is now working with Syria. Why is the United States over there? Why is the United States over there? We have nothing to do with it. Good job. Good job, Trump. Washington Post has this line. This paper has become absolutely ridiculous. It really has. Mainstream media in general has become ridiculous, but this paper is immensely ridiculous. They have this line, democracy dies in the dark. So does integrity. Well, integrity doesn't die in the dark. Integrity dies in the light of day, on the pages of your rag of a magazine. Why aren't you giving people context in regards to what's taking place? What are the moderate rebels? What about the people who actually went over there? Even some of these reporters will come back and say, we're army terrorists. United States is army terrorists. The media coding in this narrative of, hey, they're moderates. There's something different than the other terrorists that are over there that are trying to destroy the government of Syria. Yeah, they're moderates. The government said they're moderates. They got to be moderates. They just don't give honest information. And this thing of using Russia to some degree is a red herring. It's almost like the story is buried into this idea of Trump and Russia, because those are, for the most part, the overtones of this entire piece. I'll leave it at that. Greg and Adam, yeah, dude, this is embarrassing. Democracy dies in the darkness. Like I said, integrity dies on the light of the pages of the Washington Post. So, all right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, write, subscribe, and you can always support the work through Patreon. Thank you.